Good morning and welcome. You can follow along this morning on YouVersion. Look for live events Preston Crest, or in the bulletin, the sermon outline is in there that you can fill in as we go along this morning as well. Had a good retreat this weekend, didn't we? Elders and staff and spouses and just powerful time of coming together in spirit and talking about ideas. What makes this church special, unique, and how we need to build from our strengths in the future. It was a really good time up at Tanglewood, north of here. Jerry and Gail Heydrich kind of led the retreat, our missionaries who've returned from Brazil after 30-plus years, and they did an excellent job. Out in the hallway afterwards, Jerry and I were talking, and because we moved back from Brazil, I guess a little over 5 years ago, and now they're back after they just got back after 30-something years in Brazil. And we were just talking about some of the culture shock when you come back to America. And Jerry mentioned to me one of the commercials that played during the Super Bowl. And it was interesting that he mentioned this commercial. It bothered him. It disturbed him. It was a kind of a cultural shock experience. And it was interesting that he mentioned that commercial because I felt the same way. I just felt this darkness as I watched this commercial. It's a nothing against Cadillac cars, okay, but it was a Cadillac commercial. Cadillac CTS actor Neil McDonough, who many know from the Band of Brothers, and in this commercial he pulls up to his gorgeous, gigantic house, and he's walking from his car to his house, and he's talking about how other countries may take a month off for vacation each year, but we in America, we don't. We work, and look at all the stuff that we get. And the interesting thing about the commercial, or the disturbing thing about the commercial is you never see anyone else in the commercial. You don't see a wife. You don't see kids. He walks by this beautiful pool, but nobody's there. There are no floaties by the pool or pool toys or anything. It is just a guy showing off his stuff and talking about how great it is in America that we can accumulate all this stuff, and those poor slobs in other countries are taking time off. And I'm thinking, after living in Brazil, I'm sure Jerry was thinking, well, actually, they're taking time off to be with their families. They take a month off to spend time with friends because they value perhaps relationships and other people more than they value the amount of stuff they can accumulate. But it is a every once in a while you see a commercial that has a not so veiled message that greed is good. A not so veiled message that you shouldn't rest. You shouldn't be at peace until you achieve all of this, whatever it is that they're showing you. And especially that conversation with Jerry yesterday, combined with the text I was reading this week, just made me really think. Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 to 13. Finishing out our series, It's a New Day this morning. Paul says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that you at last have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned but have had no opportunity to show it. Now, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. Now this morning, as we encounter a final word from the Apostle Paul in the book of Philippians, we're going to encounter what I believe is the greatest secret of happiness, the greatest secret of joy in life. Paul is going to uncover this for us this morning. What I want you to write on your bulletin, the first kind of bullet point there is the secret to finding joy in life is contentment. It's contentment. Now, it really is a secret. First of all, that's Paul's word in verse 12, not my word, a secret. It really is a secret because few people really understand what it means to be content, all right? Even fewer people actually live in this state of contentment. So yes, it's a secret. It's a very rare thing to find a person who is contented. You see, we are born with a baseline restlessness. From the nursery and the hospital up into adulthood, we have this innate sense of dissatisfaction with the way things are around us, no matter how good they are. And as we grow older, like the Cadillac CTS commercial, as we grow older, the shrewd economy around us conspires to exacerbate that sense of dissatisfaction, to exploit that sense of discontent so that they may sell us their services and their products. And it works great. It really works. You can sell a lot of stuff by exploiting people's lack of satisfaction. Both of our kids, Claudia and David, grew up in Rio, spent their earliest and most formative years living in Brazil. And while we lived thousands of miles away from the United States, there was a particularly American symbol that became burned on their little hard drives, even in their earliest years of life, and those were the golden arches of McDonald's, all right? Now, I grew up in a town that was too small to have a McDonald's. I think when I got to be in junior high, we finally got a McDonald's, and oh, what a wonderful thing that was, okay? But I didn't get to go to McDonald's when I was 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. Didn't get to have my birthday party in the party room at McDonald's, but Claudia did in Rio. We rented the party room and had her party. But my kids got to where, even before they were 3 years old, if we got, and there were McDonald's in Brazil, as we would drive down Avenida Ayrton Senna and we would pass by the McDonald's, both of my kids got to where they recognized that restaurant, right? Whoa. They would call our attention to that restaurant. They would ask to stop, then demand to stop, then complain and cry if we didn't stop at the McDonald's. Why? In a word, better 2 words, the happy meal. The happy meal. Happiness in a box. A little tasteless hamburger, a small fries, and by the way, their fries are pretty good at McDonald's, they still are. A toy, and this wonderful, amazing little box that you could carry that little Happy Meal in. For them, happiness was found in the Happy Meal box. It was a brilliant idea. Whoever came up with this is perhaps one of the great advertising geniuses of the 20th century, because McDonald's has literally made billions of dollars off of the Happy Meal. Now, our kids don't want Happy Meals anymore. They've grown up, and you see, lest we think that our discontentment goes away as we grow up, no. Our Happy Meals just get more expensive the older we get. And Paul teaches in the text that we read this morning, Paul teaches that there is a way. It may be a secret way, it may be a hidden way, but there is a way to find peace, to find satisfaction in every circumstance of life. In any circumstance of life. A contentment that comes into your heart as you say with your heart, Jesus, you are enough. As you say in your heart, I can face and handle any situation life throws at me because, Lord, you are with me. That's where contentment is found. It's not found in a newer car, a fancier meal, designer clothes. And since contentment is such rarefied air, Since it is such a secret, since it is so hidden to so many, perhaps the easiest place to start out this morning would be with something that is not nearly so secret, that is not nearly so hidden, that is something much more familiar to us, and that is to talk about not what is contentment, but what is discontentment. All right? What is discontentment? And I put this on the outline this morning, not that this is any great truth or mystery to you, but discontentment means being unhappy in your current situation, right? Being unhappy in your current situation. Someone once wrote, and I found this in a newspaper from 1904 as I was researching for this sermon, and I thought this was just great. Some poet wrote these words: "As a rule, man's a fool. When it's hot, he wants it cool. When it's cool, he wants it hot. Always wanting what is not." This inborn and then cultivated sense of never being satisfied. Now, we are a society of innovation, not only in terms of technology, not only in terms of medicine, but we are a society that has perfected the art of innovating new ways to be unhappy. Right? Maybe the best way to make the point, and probably not the best way because it would be a very expensive way, but if we could all load onto an airplane this morning and fly to a third world country, if we could all get off the plane in Ghana and drive out to the Village of Hope orphanage, or fly to Rio and go to the Amai orphanage that we worked with down there, you would see children that don't have a mommy and daddy. You would see children that have very little in material terms, but who are contented and joyful. You want a myth buster? There's the myth buster right there. That contentment is found in the upgrade. That contentment is found in having more and having the latest. Those children, their spirits would beg to differ. But that might be expensive to load up in the plane this morning, all right? Discontentment, it is seen in our greed. It is seen in our constant lust for more and more. It is seen in our fear or fears of not having enough. Instead of being generous, instead of being open-handed, some people with means and some people with wealth are some of the most tight-fisted people you will ever come to know, because who knows what the market might do this week? It was great last week. Who knows this next week? Who knows what's going to happen the rest of this year? Who knows how much I will need to retire comfortably? Not sure exactly how much that is going to take, but I know I'm not there yet. Who knows if something is going to happen, a car accident, God forbid, or something else like that that's going to require great expenditures that we haven't planned or saved for. So discontentment, it is not a poor man's disease. It is every man's disease. Innovating new ways to be unhappy. What about the new ways we found to compare ourselves to others, right? To compare what we have or what we do not have with what other people have, we end up spoiling the good things that we have to enjoy by thinking about and craving the things we don't have. And that's not new. What is new is the innovative way we've come up with the last few years to make these comparisons in powerful new ways through social media, through the internet. We've come up, in fact, marketers in the 1990s came up with this word FOMO, F-O-M-O, which stands for fear of missing out, right? And that's a pretty new thing, really. I mean, maybe it's always been there, but we have it in spades today. Fear of missing out. It is the stress, it is the anxiety that you feel when you believe that there is someone else doing something or experiencing something that you aren't. Could be a party, could be the new movie that's come out, the new technology, the new device that's come out, a relationship that they have that you don't have. And to some extent, FOMO has always been around, the fear of missing out, but social media has made it exponentially worse. I mean, now you may be having your anniversary dinner with your wife at Chili's, right? And it's all good. You got your fajitas there. When your spouse goes to the restroom, you get on Facebook and you see your best friends who are having their anniversary dinner at Three Forks. And they're tweeting out pictures of the lobster thermidor. They're tweeting out pictures of the caviar. And all of a sudden, your chips and salsa don't look quite as exotic. New York Times writer Jenna Wortham wrote about this, and I'm not going to read everything. I will read something that she concluded when she looked at herself as a single adult living in New York City, and the angst that you feel by looking at what everybody else is doing, looking at everyone else's smiling pictures with their kids and their spouse or their boyfriend and their vacation. She says social media updates can make our simple domestic pleasures pale in comparison with all of the fun things that we could or should be doing. You may go to Cancun this spring break, and you're staying at this lovely hotel on the beach, and as you're sitting there and you open TripAdvisor, you see that actually your hotel is ranked number 32 out of 170. I mean, there are 31 hotels where people are having more fun, eating better food, have a better spot on the beach than you. An age of discontent. People looking for more expensive and more elaborate Happy Meals to keep up with this gut-level sense of dissatisfaction, of emptiness. But the Bible comes along, and I don't know if there is a more countercultural message in the book of Philippians than this message, because the Bible comes along and it tells us that contentment is possible. For starters, Paul writes to his dear friend Timothy. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, he says, Timothy, godliness with contentment. That's great gain. He writes to his friends in Philippi in verse 12 of chapter 4, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. The rest of that, let's go to verses 12 to 13. Here is the secret, all right? He said, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Write this down. For the disciple, contentment means deciding that Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough for whatever situation you face. Now we're going to uncover that. We're going to dive into that. But before we do, let me just make my nomination. I think the Oscars are upon us. Let me make my nomination for most misinterpreted verse of the Bible, all right? This would certainly be one of the finalists. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. Certainly be one of the candidates. Used by athletes, used by Christian business people, used by anyone with a dream, anyone who is building and seeking to achieve. They believe and they quote this verse that they can achieve and gain more and more through the power of Christ. A faster time in the 100-yard dash, a bigger and better bottom line for 2014 than they had in 2013. A movie idea or a book that's turned into a blockbuster Hollywood hit. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13 is generally used to say kind of that, which is kind of the opposite of what Paul is actually saying. So here's just a little rule, hermeneutics or interpretation of the Bible, a little rule to keep in mind. Text without context is pretext for trouble. Text without context is pretext for trouble. I can do all things. This is not the Apostle Paul becoming a first century Tony Robbins, all right? This is not the Apostle Paul giving an inspirational speech to salespeople in Omaha, at the Marriott in Omaha, Nebraska, about how they can double their sales this year. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And the verse is very often used like this. I am unhappy now. I am dissatisfied now. But by the power of Christ, I will change my situation. Now, what Paul is saying is quite the opposite. By the power of Christ, I've learned to be content, even if my situation doesn't change at all. That's what it's saying. Even if I don't make $1 million off of my good idea, I can be content. Even if I don't meet Prince Charming this year or Princess Charming this year, I can be content. Even if my team doesn't win the championship, whatever the circumstance, because you, Jesus, are with me and you are enough, I'm content, I'm good. Paul is saying, wherever I am, it's okay. Because you're with me. You're with me. And if anyone had a right to be discontented, it was Paul, as he sits in a prison, or at least in house arrest, writing to the Philippians. Right? Here he is as he pens these words. In jail, essentially on death row. Nero's going to try him, and Nero's not going to be favorable toward a Christian like Paul. He's pretty sure he's going to end up on a cross, just like the Lord Jesus Christ. And furthermore, Paul, as he writes to the Philippians, Paul could easily sit there and compare, right? Compare his situation to their situation. Philippians, you are so lucky. I'm in jail. You guys are free. I have no family. I have no spouse. I have no kids. I was never married. You guys are free to get on Match.com or whatever the ancient equivalent of that was and find somebody. You're free to dream about what you're going to do next week, where you're going to go on vacation. I'm here in jail, and my future is not going to go well. He could easily have compared himself to the Philippians and felt completely empty and dissatisfied. But this is the guy who's sharing with us the secret of contentment. He found it. It was in Jesus. Now, like we said, it is much easier to define discontentment. We're much more familiar with discontentment. We see a lot more of that one. But to help us further zero in on exactly what Paul is talking about, let's look at what contentment is not. Okay? Lest we get confused about what it means to be content. The first thing, this is on your outline, contentment is not equal to stoicism. Right. Stoicism. It is not equal to gritting your teeth and enduring whatever circumstance you find yourself in. It's not keeping a stiff upper lip. It's not acting calm on the outside when on the inside you are falling apart. It is not a stoic numbness to the suffering that you are experiencing or others are experiencing around you. It's not stoicism, right? And contentment is also, it's not liking your circumstance. You can write that down. Contentment does not equal enjoyment. Paul never says in this passage, oh, I liked being hungry. Oh, it was so pleasurable when I had nothing. He's not saying that. It's not the same as enjoyment. It's not learning to like everything that you are having to deal with in your life. That's not contentment. Paul doesn't like being in jail. He doesn't draw pleasure from thinking about the trial that he will face. He's found contentment in Jesus. The text never commands you to like the fact that your husband has been acting like a real jerk. Doesn't ask you to like the fact that your marriage is in crisis. It doesn't ask you to enjoy chemotherapy. The text doesn't tell you to like the fact that the IRS called and you've got an audit next week. Right? The text, God loves you, and God does not expect you to enjoy your difficulties. Okay? There is, however, a peace, a deep peace, a satisfaction of the soul that can be enjoyed in whatever circumstance you find yourself in. Paul says he's learned to be content with nothing, with plenty, starving or full. In Christ, his soul lacks nothing, even when his life is turbulent. The contented person, I think the contented person may say, hey, I don't like this situation, but I can cope with this situation because of you, Lord Jesus. Finally, contentment does not equal indifference. Does not equal indifference. It's not learning to settle for situations that are less than they ought to be. Right? That's not contentment. It's not resignment. It's not accommodating, giving in. There are things going on around us. There may be things happening in your life right now that are not okay, that are not as they should be, and that you should not be okay with. Contentment doesn't mean settling. It doesn't mean making accommodations and saying things are right and good and healthy when they really are not. That's not what contentment is. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, that because of the grace God poured out over him, he worked harder than anyone else. So contentment for Paul didn't mean easy street. It didn't mean unplugging from everything going on around him. It meant he had the fuel, he had the energy, he had the resources to work very hard and achieve very much. Dallas Willard wrote about this in a very thoughtful quotation. He wrote, "Action is a receptacle for grace, not a substitute for it." Right? So action is a receptacle for grace, not a substitute for grace. He said, grace is God acting in our lives to do things we can't do on our own. Grace is not opposed to effort. It is opposed to earning. Contented people are not low achievers. They aren't less successful. The fact that their hearts are full means that they have more to give. They can enjoy next level living because they have more to give and because they are not caught up in the meaningless rat race of comparing what they have and do not have to other people and believing that the scoreboard is how much money you have or how new your car is. They're not caught up in that mindless rat race. They have been freed by Jesus to care about things that, guess what, really matter. So write this on the outline this morning. Contentment means believing. Back to this theme. Contentment means believing, Jesus, you are enough for me. I may not like this situation, but I can cope with it because you are with me. Now, if Jesus for you is a fire extinguisher, all right, go with me on this. If Jesus is the one you bend your knees and you start praying and you talk to Jesus when things are really going bad. In case of emergency, break glass, there's Jesus. If that's what Jesus is to you, this is not going to work. Jesus is not one to be added as an additive to your life, or as a little seasoning that you sprinkle on top of your life. We talk about here, discipleship is a Jesus-filled life, not a Jesus-flavored life. What Paul is calling to us to is a life centered on Jesus. The New Testament word, I guess you could say, is lordship, where He is reigning over your life and in your life. So we're going to talk now about, just 30 seconds here, the University of Contentment, about going to contentment school, all right? University of Contentment, on your outline. Contentment does not come naturally, okay? And so it is learned. It is something cultivated and grown and learned. If contentment came naturally to us, right, you would just look around and see tons of contented people walking around the streets of North Dallas, but not so much. Huh? Paul says in verse 12, he says, I learned the secret of being content. I learned the secret of being content. It is a process of learning. It is intentional. It is a choosing. It is a developing. It is learning and growing in contentment. It is the University of Contentment. Being a disciple is being enrolled in this University of Contentment. It is learning to find satisfaction and peace in Jesus, not something that happens overnight. And since contentment is based on a relationship, like any relationship, it must be cultivated over time. The longer I trust Jesus, the longer I experience His presence in all kinds of life situations, the more naturally and easily I lean into Him when times are good, when times are tough. The more I experience Christ, the more I find myself infused with His strength, the more I find that I'm up to the task, I'm up to the situation, whatever it may be. There are plenty of things in life that I cannot handle. There are no things in life, Jesus, that the two of us can't handle. Enough is an interesting word. Enough. Enough is a concept our culture is not so good at. We're good at discontentment. We're good at restlessness. We're good at striving. We're good at looking and longing for more. And so I guess the ending point, the landing point this morning is, am I at a point where I can say to Jesus, you're enough for me. Lord, you're enough for me. There's a passage in Isaiah 55, just want to read the first few verses, but it is a passage that I believe speaks into, and it's interesting, you find out all of this stuff about discontentment is not new, but it speaks to the different places people run to and chase after, trying to fill their lives up with meaning and satisfaction. And God speaks a word to these people, to us. Isaiah 55, verses 1 to 3. It's an invitation. Come to me, all you who are thirsty. Come to the waters. You who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. You have to think about what he's saying here, okay? God is saying now in verse 2, why spend money on what is not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? Basically, why are you giving your hearts over and chasing things that in your 40 years of existence, 50 years, 60, 70, they haven't given you contentment yet. So why are you still chasing after those things? Listen, he says, listen to me. Eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Hear me, that your soul may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. And at a time and in a place where people are scurrying around, chasing their tails, pouring their lives into all sorts of endeavors in order to find some meaning and to find some peace, God says, would you hang on a second? Can you just turn loose of that for a second? And can I ask you a question? When has that ever brought you peace? At what point in your past did you find lasting satisfaction at that? Can you just hang on a second? And would you come to me? And would you try me out? Would you just let your soul delight in me instead of chasing after things that don't satisfy, that don't bring contentment? This morning, it may be that you just need to circle up with some people and pray over whatever it is that is worrying you, that is stressing you out, whatever it is that is taking peace away, and just invite Jesus to come into the center. Remember Jesus on the storm-ravaged Sea of Galilee? When Jesus was in the center, the storm went still. Maybe you need to bring that storm to Him today. Maybe you need to put your faith in Jesus for the first time. You can be immersed in the name of Jesus, buried in Jesus, and begin a life with Him where you say today and every day, you're enough. You're enough for me. Let's say that as we stand together, as we worship.